Dawn broke over Coyote Bend with a copper hush, the sky the color of old blood washed thin. Dust moved like breath over the plain, whispering against fence wire and the warped planks of the feed store. The town stirred slow, boots scuffing wood, a horse snorting near the hitching rail, a church bell coughing once into the stillness. From the far edge of the street came a man with a sack of wilted carrots slung over one shoulder, walking like the wind had weight. His name was Elias Harlow, a farmer by trade, a widower by fate, and a man who had learned that silence could keep a heart from splintering outright. He had the kind of face you forgot until you saw his eyes. There was something raw and unguarded there, the look of a man who'd been listening to the same ache for too many years. The drought had nearly broken him, left his fields as brittle as bone. Yet every morning he came to town with whatever survived his dying land, setting the vegetables on the market table like offerings to a god that never answered. That morning the heat rose early, trembling over the dirt road. Elias was counting his few coins when he saw her. She stood near the public well, wrapped in a torn blanket the color of ash. Her dark hair was tangled, her skin windburned, her feet bare and bleeding. A few townsfolk loitered nearby, watching with tight mouths. She was Apache, and that alone was enough to turn hearts to stone in Coyote Bend. She leaned over the well's lip, drawing up the bucket with trembling hands. A boy hissed something cruel, and laughter followed. The woman flinched, spilling water on herself, the bucket's chain clattering. Elias watched her bend to drink from her cupped palms, the motion desperate and childlike. A murmur of disgust rippled through the onlookers. "Savage," someone muttered. Elias felt something stir, a flicker of shame that wasn't his but still burned him clean through. He walked toward her before he could think better of it. The crowd quieted, waiting for spectacle. He set down his sack and reached into his coat pocket. The coins inside were his last, enough for a bit of flour, maybe a candle. He laid one on the well's stone rim and pushed it toward her. "Buy yourself bread," he said. The woman's eyes lifted, dark, wild, and bright with something like disbelief. "Don't spend money on me," she whispered. Her voice was hoarse, cracked from thirst and pride. "I'm not worth your coin." Elias felt the heat of a dozen eyes on him. He kept his tone steady. "A man can decide what his coin is worth." She shook her head, tears shining unshed. "You'll make enemies giving to me. I've already got enough." He placed the bread he'd bought on the edge of the well, then stepped back. The woman stared at it, torn between hunger and humiliation. When she finally took it, her hands trembled so badly she dropped it into the dust. She knelt, brushed the dirt away, and ate anyway, small bites like prayer. The townsfolk began to drift off, disappointed that there'd been no shouting. But Elias could feel their judgment lingering like flies. Mrs. Doolin, the preacher's wife, passed him with her lips pressed tight as a blade. "Mercy's wasted on that kind," she hissed. He didn't answer. Mercy wasn't wasted if it kept one soul alive a little longer. That evening, the sun went down bleeding behind the buttes. Elias trudged home through a wind that smelled of dry rain. His farm was a small square of cracked earth, the crops curled to paper. He fed his mule a handful of grain, then sat on his porch and watched the light drain from the sky. He thought of the Apache woman, of her voice trembling around the word worth. The words stuck to his mind like burrs. He dreamed that night of water running through his field, cool and endless. When he woke, the world was silent again. He went about his work, his body moving by habit, but his thoughts kept circling back to the woman at the well. By noon he couldn't stand it. He took a loaf of bread and walked the 2 miles back to town. The well was empty. No sign of her. But he set the bread on the stone lip and left without waiting. The next morning, when he returned to fetch water, the bread was gone. In its place lay a small bundle of sage tied with a strip of red cloth and a carved wooden feather, worn smooth by touch. He turned it over in his palm, feeling something tighten low in his chest. It wasn't gratitude that filled him, exactly. It was recognition. Days passed. The town kept its gossip alive. The men at the saloon laughed about Elias and his pet Apache. The laughter stung, but he said nothing. He'd learned long ago that words could wound deeper than silence. Still, each evening he left a little food by the well, and each morning something small appeared in return. A stone polished by water, a single crow feather, once even a piece of turquoise no bigger than a thumbnail. One afternoon, a wind began to build. The sky turned pale and hard, the horizon smudged with red dust. Elias was finishing his chores when he saw her again, walking the road that led past his farm. She moved with difficulty, clutching the blanket around her shoulders. He hesitated only a moment before calling out. She stopped, wary as a deer. He held up a canteen. "Water," he said simply. Her gaze darted toward the town behind her, then back to him. She stepped closer, slow and cautious. When she took the canteen, her fingers brushed his. The contact sent a small, startling warmth through him. She drank, then handed it back, her eyes lowered. "Nida," she said quietly, as if giving a secret. He nodded. "Elias." A gust of wind lifted the dust into spirals around them. In the distance, thunder growled. Nida looked toward the horizon, fear flickering across her face. "Storm coming," she murmured. He glanced at the clouds gathering like bruises above the buttes. "You'll need shelter." Her mouth tightened. "No one will let me in." "Then stay here till it passes." She hesitated. The wind carried the scent of sage and rain that never came. Finally, she nodded. Together they hurried to the small barn at the edge of his property. He pulled the door closed just as the first blast of sand hit the walls like shot. Inside, the air smelled of hay and sweat and dust. Nida stood by the stall, clutching her blanket. Lightning flashed through the cracks, followed by a thunderclap that shook the rafters. Elias lit a lantern. The glow caught her face, sharp, weary, beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with softness. "You shouldn't have helped me," she said. He met her gaze. "Maybe not. But I did." The wind howled outside, an animal's cry. For a long moment neither spoke. Then she moved closer, holding out her carved feather. "You keep this," she said. "So the storm remembers your kindness." He took it, unsure what to say. The lantern flickered, throwing gold across her skin. He saw then the exhaustion written deep around her mouth, the stubborn spark that refused to die. Outside, the storm raged harder. The roof creaked, hay swirling in the lantern light. Elias felt a strange peace amid the chaos, as if something inside him, something long buried, had drawn a breath. Nida sat beside him on the floor, her shoulder brushing his arm. They listened to the wind together, two castaways in a world that had no use for mercy. When the worst of the storm passed, a stillness fell so sudden it felt sacred. The air smelled of iron and dust. Nida rose first, brushing straw from her skirt. "Tomorrow they'll say I brought the storm," she said bitterly. Elias looked toward the fading light seeping through the boards. "Let them. Maybe the town needed washing clean." She almost smiled. Then her eyes widened. Outside, beyond the barn, a swirl of dust rose again, this one darker, alive with motion. A second wave of the storm was coming, fiercer than the first. The ground trembled underfoot. Nida stepped toward the door, but Elias caught her arm. The wind roared, tearing at the hinges. The door bucked like a living thing. For an instant, their eyes locked, fear and defiance meeting in silence. Then the latch snapped, and the door flew open to the red heart of the storm. Elias lunged forward, grabbing her hand as sand and wind exploded into the barn. The lantern blew out, plunging them into darkness streaked with lightning. The storm swallowed their voices, their shapes, everything but the grip of their joined hands. And in that wild, blinding moment as the desert screamed around them, Elias understood that nothing, neither drought nor gossip nor fear, would ever make him let go. The storm passed before dawn, leaving the world half buried in silence. Elias woke to the scent of wet dust and hay, his mouth dry, his limbs heavy as stone. Beside him, Nida stirred, her blanket powdered with red sand. A thin line of light seeped through the barn boards, carving gold into her cheek. For a moment he only watched her breathe, the faint tremor of life in a place that had nearly erased it. The land outside had changed shape overnight, fences swallowed, crops flattened. It looked like the world after an ending. Nida rose first, wrapping the blanket tight around her shoulders. Her eyes searched the ruin beyond the open door. "The storm spared no one," she said. Elias followed her gaze. His field was gone, the soil stripped bare, his meager crop shredded to ghosts. The mule was gone too, the stall door torn open. He felt the loss like a dull blow, but no surprise. The land had always taken more than it gave. "It'll come back," he said quietly. Her voice was bitter. "The earth remembers what it's lost." They stepped into the morning. The town shimmered in the distance, half lost beneath a haze of dust. Smoke drifted from chimneys, but the usual sounds, roosters, wagons, laughter, were gone. Coyote Bend was licking its wounds. Elias and Nida walked in silence down the dirt road, the air heavy with the storm's aftertaste. When they reached the first cluster of buildings, people began to appear, eyes following them from behind curtains and half-open doors. The preacher's wife stood outside the church, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles whitened. "There she is," someone whispered. "The Apache woman. Brought the devil wind herself." Elias kept walking, his steps steady. He could feel the scorn burning into his back. Nida's chin lifted, her jaw set in quiet defiance. The two of them moved through the murmuring crowd like travelers in a dream. Sheriff Ketter waited near the saloon, his hat low against the sun. He was a thick man with eyes that gave nothing away. "Elias Harlow," he said. "Word is you sheltered a trespasser." Elias stopped. "I sheltered a person." The sheriff's mouth twitched. "Same thing, far as you're concerned. Different, far as the law is." His gaze slid to Nida. "We've got soldiers coming through, scouting for escapees from Fort Graham. You'd do well not to get mistaken for an accomplice." Nida's shoulders tensed. Elias stepped half in front of her. "She's no escapee." "You willing to swear that before the captain when he rides in?" "If I have to." The sheriff studied him a moment, then spat into the dust. "Suit yourself. But don't come crying when you lose what's left of your land." He walked away, leaving a silence that felt heavier than the storm. Nida turned toward Elias, her eyes shining with anger and something else. "Shame, maybe. You shouldn't have said that. They'll take everything from you." "They've already taken near enough," he said. She looked at him then, truly looked, and he could see the battle waging inside her. The urge to run, the deeper urge to stay. That night, she helped him rebuild the fence. They worked in near darkness, the horizon still trembling with distant lightning. Each post driven into the ground was a small act of defiance. When the work was done, Elias poured them each a cup of weak coffee. They sat on the porch steps, too tired for words. The night smelled of ash and sage. Somewhere, an owl called. Nida broke the silence. "I had a child once," she said. Her voice was flat, but her hands trembled around the tin cup. "The soldiers took him when they burned our camp. I never found his body. I think the wind still carries his cry." Elias said nothing. He had no comfort that would not sound hollow. He only reached out and rested his hand over hers. For a heartbeat, she didn't move. Then she let out a shuddering breath, neither sob nor sigh. "You're not like them," she whispered. "I'm not sure what I am anymore," he said. Days bled into one another. The town avoided them now, as though kindness itself were contagious. Elias worked the ruined field, planting where he could. Nida mended tools, cleaned the barn, sang low songs in a language he couldn't understand. The sound soothed him, like rain remembered. One morning, the thunder of hooves shattered the stillness. Elias looked up from the field to see dust rising along the road. Soldiers, 4 of them, led by a captain with a silver badge. They rode hard, faces hidden behind scarves. Nida froze where she stood, her eyes wide. Elias felt a cold weight settle in his gut. The soldiers dismounted, spreading out in a slow circle. The captain spoke first. "We're tracking an Apache woman, escaped from Fort Graham 2 months past. Fits the description of the one with you." Elias forced himself to meet the man's gaze. "She's no prisoner. She's done nothing wrong." The captain's eyes swept the small farm, the broken fences, the patched roof. "That so? Strange how trouble finds the poorest houses." He stepped closer. If she's innocent, let her come forward and speak for herself. Nida's breath came shallow. If I speak they'll shoot, she whispered. Elias moved slightly, placing himself between her and the soldiers. You'll have to shoot me first, he said. The captain studied him for a long moment, then reached for his sidearm. The air thickened, every sound distant but the creak of leather and the hiss of wind through dry grass. Elias's heart hammered. He knew one wrong move would mean the end for both of them. Nida stepped out from behind him. Her face was calm now, eerily calm. Stop, she said. I'll go. Elias turned, disbelief burning through him. No. She shook her head. You gave your coin once. You don't owe me your life. But he could see it in her eyes. She meant to surrender. The thought struck him harder than fear itself. Slowly, he reached into his pocket and drew out the silver coin he'd kept for years, the last piece of his savings, polished smooth by worry. He walked to the captain and held it out. This is all I have, he said. Take it. For your trouble. Then ride away. The captain stared at the coin, expression unreadable. For a heartbeat, no one moved. The wind shifted, carrying the faint sound of church bells from the town. Finally, the captain holstered his gun. You're a fool, farmer, he said. He took the coin, turned his horse and gestured for his men to follow. As they rode off, Elias felt the strength drain from his legs. Nida was staring at him, her face pale with disbelief. You gave them your last coin, she said. He tried to smile. Money's only good if it buys something worth keeping. She shook her head slowly, tears tracing lines through the dust on her cheeks. They'll call you mad. Let them. The horizon shimmered with heat. In the distance, the soldiers were already dissolving into the haze, ghosts swallowed by the desert. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The wind lifted the scent of sage again, mingled now with the faint sweetness of rain far away. Nida stepped closer, her hand brushing his sleeve. You shouldn't have done that, she murmured. I couldn't do anything else. She looked at him then with something deeper than gratitude, a kind of fierce, wordless understanding. Behind her, the sky opened wide and bright, a single column of sunlight breaking through the clouded blue. It touched the ruined field, the broken fence, the empty road, turning everything it touched to gold. Nida lifted her face to the light. Maybe, she said softly, the earth does remember mercy after all. Elias watched the light spread across the land and felt, for the first time in years, the weight in his chest ease. The world was still harsh, the future uncertain, but somewhere inside that quiet, a seed of hope took root. He turned toward her. Then let's make sure it remembers us. The wind stirred again, carrying with it the low hum of her song, fragile, defiant, and endless. The sound followed them as they stood side by side, the desert stretching before them, the horizon trembling with promise and threat alike. And though the world beyond remained unforgiving, for that fleeting moment, it felt like mercy might still be strong enough to survive it.